I don't think I ever really had a childhood. Not in the way people talk about it. Bike rides, scraped knees, safe hugs, birthday parties that weren't about someone else's drama. My earliest memories are of silence. Not peaceful silence, but that tense, charged kind of quiet that comes right before something explodes. That's how I grew up, walking on emotional eggshells around a woman who never let me forget she gave up everything for me. My mom, Teresa, wasn't physically abusive. Not in the way you might think. She didn't hit me, at least not regularly, not in ways that left bruises. Her violence was quieter. It came in guilt trips, emotional landmines, manipulation, and carefully timed breakdowns. If I tried to step away, she'd collapse. Not metaphorically. She'd actually fall to the ground, shaking, gasping for air like she was dying, and scream my name like I'd stabbed her. She did this in the grocery store once. I was 10. I had wanted to buy a pack of markers. That's it. Just some markers for a school project. She said no, we didn't have money for things like that. When I protested, she whispered sharply, "Do you want me to have a panic attack right here?" I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but moments later, she was on the floor, clutching her chest, crying out that she was dizzy, that she couldn't breathe, that I was killing her. People gathered. Someone called an ambulance. In the hospital, she told the nurses I was a difficult child and that she didn't know how to raise someone so cold. That incident was minor compared to what came later. She cycled through a carousel of awful men. There was Ron, who smelled like sweat and cigarettes and who once kicked our dog so hard she couldn't walk right for weeks. I remember screaming at him, and he grabbed me by the arm and shook me until my teeth clacked. Teresa told me to apologize to him. Then there was Dale. He wore suits, and for a while, I thought maybe he was different. He smiled at me, called me sweetheart, bought me a hoodie from Old Navy. I was 11. One night, I woke up to him standing in my doorway, just staring. I told my mom. She called me a liar and said I was jealous, that I wanted all the attention. A few months later, she found out he was cheating on her. She tried to kill herself with pills. I had to call 911. She lived, and for months afterward, she reminded me every day that the only reason she was still alive was because of me, and I better not forget it. That became her most powerful weapon, reminding me that she chose to live for me. Like I owed her something for that. Like it gave her permission to rip me apart whenever she wanted. At school, I was the weird girl with the silent eyes. Teachers tried to reach out. Some of them saw the bruises, or the way I flinched when someone touched my shoulder. Once, a counselor asked me if everything was okay at home. I nodded and said yes. Because if I told the truth, I'd be dead. Maybe not literally, but it would have been worse. Teresa had ways of making me regret speaking. When I was 13, I got a part in the school play. Just one line, but I was excited. I stayed after school for rehearsal, and when I got home 2 hours late, she was waiting. She had packed a suitcase mine. She stood there, tears on her face, telling me she couldn't take it anymore, that I clearly didn't care about her, that I could go live with my precious drama teacher if that's what I wanted. I begged her not to kick me out. I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe. She smiled through her own tears and hugged me, saying, "Now you know how I feel." When I turned 15, I started secretly working at a diner 2 nights a week. Teresa didn't know. I told her I was at the library. I saved every dollar in a sock under my mattress. My plan was to run away. I had this fantasy that I'd find my dad. He left when I was 3. She always said he abandoned us, but I found an old birthday card from him when I was cleaning the closet. It said he missed me. He wrote his number on the back. I called it from a payphone once, just to hear the voicemail. It was him. The money grew slowly. I hid it well. Until the night she found the sock. She was cleaning, which meant she was snooping. I came home to find the contents of my room dumped onto the floor, drawers overturned, mattress flipped, clothes everywhere. She was sitting in the middle of the mess, holding the sock. I'll never forget the look on her face. Cold. Flat. She asked, "Planning to abandon your mother like he did?" I tried to explain. I told her I just wanted to save money for college. She didn't believe me. Or maybe she did, but it didn't matter. She tore the bills up in front of me. Every single one. I tried to grab them, but she shoved me so hard I fell backward into my closet door. Then she laughed and said, "See how it feels to be betrayed?" After that, I wasn't allowed out of the house except for school. She started tracking me. I don't even know how she managed it, probably followed me once or twice to figure out my routes. If I was 5 minutes late coming home, I'd find her lying on the floor, gasping, "I thought you were dead. I thought you left me." I was about to swallow pills. And then came Martin. She met him online. I was 16. He was younger than the others, maybe mid-30s. British. He had a fake charm, like the kind you see in con artists. I didn't trust him from the start, but she was obsessed. She bought new clothes, started wearing makeup again, and lost weight she didn't need to lose. When he finally came to stay with us for 2 weeks, the nightmare escalated. He was controlling. He didn't yell, but he'd say things like, "You'd be prettier if you smiled more," or, "You should respect your mom, she's been through a lot." Once, he walked in on me changing. Didn't apologize. Just smirked and said, "Don't be shy." I told Teresa. She slapped me. I locked my bedroom door after that, and she unscrewed it from the hinges. Martin left eventually, but not before draining her savings. I don't know what he promised her, maybe a marriage, maybe a fantasy life in London, but when he disappeared, she blamed me. Said I drove him away with my attitude. For weeks, she barely spoke to me. Then, one night, she crawled into my bed while I was asleep, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "You're all I have left. Don't ever leave me." That moment was the most terrifying of all. Because she meant it. She wanted me to stay broken, small, dependent. She didn't want me to grow. Every time I tried to stretch beyond her reach, she reminded me she was fragile, that her life depended on me, that I had no right to leave her. And I believed her. For years. I didn't make friends. I didn't date. I barely existed outside of her shadow. Because any spark of independence triggered some new crisis. She'd lose her job and blame me. She'd get sick and say I stressed her out. She'd lock herself in the bathroom for hours and leave the water running so I'd think she drowned. By the time I was 17, I had learned to predict her moods like weather patterns. A shift in her tone, a sigh too heavy, a certain way she looked at the kitchen knives. That's how I knew it was going to be a bad night. I don't know if any of this makes sense to someone who's never lived it. Who's never had a parent use love like a weapon, wielding guilt and fear like knives. But this was my world. This was how I grew up. And somehow, even in all of that, I still felt guilty for wanting to leave. Because she made sure I would. When I was 18, I thought I had finally made it out. I had worked my ass off through high school, top of my class, extracurriculars, volunteer hours, every scholarship essay I could find. I didn't just get into Hillstone University. I got a full ride. Tuition, housing, meals, books, all covered. It was everything I dreamed of. An actual escape. A life that didn't include fake seizures, emotional hostage-taking, or waking up to find my mother hovering over me in the dark, whispering that I didn't love her anymore. I held the acceptance letter in my hand for hours, just staring at it. Then I showed it to her. At first, she smiled. She hugged me. She said, "I knew you'd get in." For a second, I let myself believe she was proud of me. Then came the change. That night, she started coughing. Hard. Wet. Violent. She said her chest felt tight. I offered to call an ambulance, but she refused. She lay on the couch, clutching her side, moaning about sharp pains and how they radiated down her arm. She wouldn't let me leave her side. It went on for days. She started shaking, claiming her vision was blurry. I offered to take her to urgent care. Again, she refused. Instead, she cried. She told me she was dying. That she didn't want to ruin my chance at a fancy life, but that she might not make it through the fall. "If you leave," she whispered, "I'll probably be gone before Christmas." She made me choose between college and her life. And I chose her. I deferred the scholarship. Told them it was for family reasons. They said I could reapply next year. I never did. I enrolled in a local community college. Lived at home. Worked part-time at a bookstore downtown. I told myself it was temporary. That she'd get better. That I'd find another way out. But she never got better. And I never left. She made sure of that. When I was 20, she faked a cancer scare. Told me she'd found a lump. Took me to the clinic with her. Made me sit in the waiting room while she sobbed into a clipboard. Later, she claimed they found abnormal cells, but refused to show me any paperwork. When I asked questions, she flipped. Said I didn't believe her. Said I didn't care if she died. I spent the night curled up on the bathroom floor, trying to muffle my own crying so she wouldn't accuse me of guilt-tripping her. She never mentioned cancer again. No follow-ups. No treatment. Just silence. I started to pull away emotionally. Quietly. Internally. I didn't tell her about work promotions or school projects. I avoided being home as much as I could. And that's when I met Jessica. I was 23, working late shifts at the bookstore. She came in one night near closing. Tall, short dark hair, wearing a heavy coat even though it was May. She was looking for a book on grief. Her mom had died recently. We started talking. She made me laugh in that way that actually felt like laughing. Not polite, not strained, but real. She came back the next night. Bought a different book. The night after that, she brought me coffee. Within a week, we were sitting in the back room on my breaks, talking about everything. Books, movies, regrets, family. I didn't tell her much about mine. Just said things were complicated. Our first kiss was after a poetry reading. She read a piece about loss. I cried. She wiped my tears with her sleeve and kissed me like it didn't matter that we were in a room full of strangers. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. We started dating quietly. She had her own place, small, lived in, full of plants and mismatched coffee mugs. I started staying over a few nights a week. For the first time in my life, I had a toothbrush somewhere else. Clothes in a drawer. Peace. And of course, it didn't last. Teresa started calling more. At first, just casual check-ins. Then more frantic. I can't breathe. I feel dizzy. The walls are closing in. I'd race home only to find her on the couch, fine, eating cereal and watching reruns. I confronted her once. Told her she couldn't keep doing this. That I had a life. She threw the remote at the wall, screamed that I was abandoning her, and then collapsed in the hallway, shaking. I panicked. Called 911. At the hospital, she told the nurse I was under a lot of pressure and probably overreacted. Jessica saw the bruises on my arms from where I tried to lift my mother off the floor. She asked questions. I dodged them. Eventually, I introduced them. It was a disaster. Teresa put on her fragile angel act. She told Jessica about how hard her life had been, how I had episodes of detachment, how she'd done everything for me and only wanted me to be safe. Jessica smiled politely. Afterward, she said, I don't know what game your mom is playing, but it's messed up. She tried to help. Suggested therapy. Boundaries. Even offered to go with me to a session. That's when Teresa really escalated. She started claiming she was hearing voices. Said someone was watching her through the vents. One night, I came home to find every mirror in the house covered with towels. She said they were listening devices. When I tried to leave, she grabbed my hair and screamed, she's turning you against me. I stayed that night. Slept in the hallway with a baseball bat in my hand. Jessica begged me to move in with her. She said we could figure it out. That I didn't deserve this. I wanted to say yes. I really did. But Teresa had one more card to play. She claimed she had a stroke. I got the call while I was at Jessica's apartment. My mom's neighbor, Deb, said she found her slumped over in the kitchen, half-conscious, mumbling. I left immediately. Jessica said, Rachel, what if she's lying? But what if she wasn't? I drove to the ER in a daze. Teresa was in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, groggy but awake. She looked at me and whispered, I thought I'd never see you again. I broke. Sat beside her all night. The next day, the doctor pulled me aside. Said the scans were clean. No signs of a stroke. Might have been a panic attack. She was being released that afternoon. She played the part of the invalid for 2 more weeks. Cane, blankets, heating pads. Made me spoon-feed her soup and bathe her feet. Said she was too dizzy to walk unassisted. Anytime I tried to leave the house, she'd slump over dramatically and mutter, Please, not yet? I'm scared. Jessica waited as long as she could. Then one day she said, I love you, but I can't compete with a ghost that's still alive. I told her I understood. She kissed me goodbye and said, if you ever get out, come find me. And then she was gone. I told my mother that night. She nodded slowly, looked down at her hands, and said, I knew she'd leave. People always leave. But not you. You're all I have. And I just stood there. Hollow. I had lost the one person who saw me. The one person who made me feel like I wasn't just a walking wound. Because my mother needed me to stay broken. And I let her. I was 28 the first time I realized I didn't have to live like that anymore. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't some grand moment of empowerment or lightning bolt revelation. It was quiet. Slow. Like peeling glue from your skin and realizing how raw it left you underneath. It started with Amanda. She came into my life when I was working at a nonprofit legal center downtown. I was the intake coordinator, answering calls, managing appointments, doing whatever the underfunded system needed. She was an advocacy liaison. One of those people who could walk into a room and change the temperature just by speaking. Calm, direct, never condescending. She handled domestic violence cases and had this stare like she could see straight through you. We first talked over lunch. It was my birthday, and no one in the office knew. I hadn't mentioned it. I never did. Amanda noticed I hadn't eaten and handed me half her sandwich without asking. Turkey and avocado. I told her I didn't like avocado. She shrugged and said, no one really likes it. They just don't want to be judged. I laughed. A real laugh. First one in weeks. We started eating lunch together after that. Then after work walks. Then drinks. It wasn't romantic, not yet. She was just safe. Steady. She asked questions without pushing. Made space without expecting anything in return. The first time she came over to my apartment, my phone rang 4 times in 10 minutes. Teresa. She'd already left 2 voicemails by the time I picked up. She was crying. Said she fell in the tub. Claimed she couldn't feel her legs. I was already grabbing my coat. Amanda touched my wrist and said, does she have a history of falling when you're unavailable? I froze. No one had ever asked it like that before. I didn't answer. I just left. When I got to the house, Teresa was on the couch. Hair wet. Blanket around her shoulders. Eyes dry. Oh, she said like she didn't expect me. You came fast. I asked about her legs. She stood up to prove she was fine. Said it must have been a nerve pinch. The next morning, Amanda sent me a link to a PDF. It was titled Coercive Control, Emotional Abuse Patterns in Family Relationships. I read it during my shift and had to lock myself in the supply room to cry. Everything was there. The fake illnesses. The sudden emergencies. The guilt. The sabotage. The way my mother used love like a leash. I started keeping a log. I documented every call, every lie, every manipulation. Amanda taught me how to recognize patterns. To name the things I had lived with for so long. Gaslighting. Emotional incest. Dependency conditioning. I wrote them all down like vocabulary words. Terms for things I thought were normal. Then came the final straw. Amanda and I had been seeing each other for a few months, officially. She came with me to a community art exhibit one evening. We took a photo together. Just one. I uploaded it to a private Instagram story only visible to close friends. The next day, Teresa called. Her voice was trembling. I saw your picture, she said. I know what you're doing. I asked her what she meant. She said she'd created a fake Instagram to spy on me. Made up a profile using a stock photo and messaged some of my coworkers. She'd seen my post. You looked intimate, she said. Her tone was cold, sharp. Then she went silent for a day. Then she sent me an email with an attachment, a draft obituary she had written for herself. No explanation. Just the subject line, since I'll probably be dead soon anyway. Amanda was the one who stopped me from replying. She said, "This isn't just toxic. It's dangerous. She's escalating." She was right. It had gotten worse. Teresa started showing up at my work. Once, she stood across the street for hours, just watching. I confronted her, and she screamed at me in public, said I was selfish, said Amanda was corrupting me, said I was choosing strangers over blood. That night, Amanda took my hand and said, "You don't owe her your life just because she gave you one." And that was the first time I believed it. I made a plan. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Amanda at first. I knew I had to do it right. Clean. Quiet. Fast. I found a job posting in another city, Summerfield. Small legal advocacy group. Similar work. Better pay. I applied and interviewed remotely. I got the job. I opened a new bank account under my middle name. Transferred everything. Rented a studio apartment sight unseen. Paid first and last month's rent in advance. I waited for a weekend when Teresa was visiting her sister 2 towns over. I told her I had to work. She didn't suspect anything. In those 48 hours, I packed my things. The essentials. Left the rest. Canceled my phone contract and got a new number. Transferred my mail to a P.O. box. Wrote one short note. "I'm safe. Please don't contact me." I left it in the mailbox. Then I left. I drove 6 hours without stopping. My hands were shaking the entire time. I kept expecting her to call, to show up on the side of the road, to somehow find me. But she didn't. The first night in Summerfield, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the bare floor of my new apartment and stared at the front door, waiting for the knock that never came. Then came the voicemails. Over 30 of them. I blocked her number. Then came the emails. She created 3 new addresses. Each one more desperate than the last. "I need you. You don't know what you're doing. Fine. Die out there without me." She sent pictures of herself in a hospital gown. No context. Then pictures of pills. Then a photo of a noose she made from a bedsheet. I didn't reply. Amanda helped me file for a restraining order. She drove to Summerfield and stayed with me for the hearing. We brought the call logs, the emails, the photos, even the fake obituary. The judge read everything. Teresa didn't show up. I was granted a 3-year no-contact order. The silence afterward was the loudest thing I've ever heard. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I just sat there, numb, letting the reality settle in. I was free. Legally, logistically, physically free. But emotionally, that part would take longer. Amanda didn't push. She just stayed. Quiet, patient, present. She said, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." But I knew better. It wasn't the end or the beginning. It was the first real breath I'd taken in 28 years. And that was enough. Even after I disappeared from her life, Teresa didn't slow down. She just shifted gears. Cut off from me, she turned her energy outward, toward anyone who would listen. Anyone she thought she could still control. The collapse didn't happen overnight. That's not how people like her fall. They unravel in slow, desperate fragments, clinging to power until it's ripped out of their hands. But I saw it. Heard about it. People talked. Small-town gossip travels like wildfire, and even though I was hours away, her name still managed to reach me. The first thing to go was the money. She had always been strange about finances, paranoid but reckless. Growing up, she used to hide cash inside cereal boxes, in the freezer, under couch cushions. She never trusted banks, but she also couldn't stop spending. At one point, she had 5 separate credit cards, 2 maxed out, 1 in collections, and 1 in my name, which I didn't even find out about until years later. After I left, she spiraled. There was no one to monitor her, to guilt, to make her feel justified for her choices. So she started spending like she was trying to fill a black hole. New iPhones, 3 in 1 year. Designer bags, even though she hadn't had a real job in years. She ordered custom furniture online, posted pictures of it on Facebook, then returned half of it a month later after claiming it was defective. Her car, an old Toyota Corolla, got traded in for a leased Lexus she couldn't afford. Within 5 months, it was repossessed. But the real damage came from gambling. It started with the online slots, then casino apps, then late-night trips to the Riverwind Casino 2 towns over. She claimed she had a system, told her sister, Aunt Brenda, that she was up $3,000. The truth? She lost nearly $20,000 in less than a year. Maxed out every card she had and even drained the joint checking account she had briefly opened with her new friend from church, someone named Ethan. Ethan was 25. I only heard about him through back channels, an ex-coworker from the nonprofit who still lived in my hometown, Melissa. She emailed me one day with the subject line, "You'll never believe who your mom's dating." He wasn't really dating her, of course. He was a youth pastor, barely out of college. Moved to town for a temporary posting at the Church of Grace in Bloomfield. Teresa met him at a Bible study group she started attending 2 months after I filed the restraining order. She told people she'd turned over a new leaf. Started wearing white, showing up early to prayer groups, volunteering to lead healing sessions. In reality, she was circling. Ethan was soft-spoken, polite, probably a little naive. He started giving her rides home, then fixing small things around her house. Then somehow she convinced him to help her get back on her feet by co-signing a short-term loan she swore she could repay in weeks. She didn't. She also started telling people he was special to her. Once, she allegedly called him my miracle boy in front of a group of elderly women at church, and he turned beet red. Then came the incident with the texts. I didn't see them myself, but according to Melissa and two other people who messaged me after, it went like this. Teresa texted Ethan late one night. Dozens of messages. Some spiritual, some emotional, some clearly flirtatious. She told him she had a dream God wanted them to be together. That he was sent to redeem her. When he didn't respond, she sent a photo. Not explicit, but unsettling. Her in a white robe, holding a Bible, lying on her couch. The caption read, "Ready for the word." He cut contact the next day. Blocked her. Reported her to the church council. They launched a quiet investigation, and within a week, she was no longer welcome at Church of Grace. She told people she left because God called her elsewhere. The reality? She was removed from all volunteer positions and asked not to return. That was only the beginning. Next came the family fallout. She had always kept a tenuous grip on her relatives. Aunt Brenda tolerated her out of obligation. Uncle Lee, her younger brother, avoided her entirely after a fight in 2017 where she accused him of stealing her wedding ring, which she later found in her sock drawer. Cousin Mara tried to stay in touch, but once Teresa started showing up unannounced and crying on her porch, begging for help with rent, even Mara cut ties. Teresa burned every bridge with kerosene. She sent mass emails to the entire family, accusing them of conspiring against her. Said I had brainwashed everyone, that I was feeding them lies, that they would all regret abandoning her. When no one responded, she escalated, posting on Facebook about how her family had left her to rot. She even created a GoFundMe titled Help a Mother Heal, claiming she'd been the victim of spiritual abuse and needed funds for trauma therapy. It raised $35 before being flagged and removed. Then came the eviction. The house she'd lived in, my childhood home, was a rental. She'd lived there for nearly 12 years. After I left, she started missing payments. The landlord, Mr. Henley, was patient at first. He knew her. His wife had even taught me in middle school. But she stopped returning calls. Ignored notices. When he finally came by in person, she screamed at him from the upstairs window, accusing him of intimidation tactics. He filed for eviction 3 weeks later. The day the sheriff came to enforce it, she locked herself inside. Played opera music at full blast. Covered all the windows and bedsheets. The officers had to talk her down for nearly 2 hours before she opened the door, claiming she'd had a stroke and couldn't move. EMS found no signs of stroke. Inside, the house was a mess. Trash piled in corners. Burnt-out candles. Tarot cards. Empty wine bottles, even though she claimed to be 3 years sober. They found a room filled with shopping bags, unused clothes, unopened tech, even a drone still in its box. Most of it bought on credit. She had been living off loans, handouts, and debt for nearly 2 years. After the eviction, she couch-surfed for a while. First with a woman named Linda, someone she'd met at grief counseling. That lasted 2 weeks. Linda asked her to leave after catching her rummaging through her purse. Then she stayed briefly with a couple from the community center, Greg and Tasha. She claimed they were like family. She lasted 1 week. Tasha later told a mutual contact that Teresa had tried to convince Greg to put her on their joint bank account for safety reasons. By the time she tried to stay with Aunt Brenda again, everyone knew the pattern. She had nothing left. No house. No savings. No friends. No allies. Her phone was disconnected. Her car, repossessed a second time, was found parked behind a strip mall with a cracked windshield and a note inside that read, "You took everything." I never reached out. I wanted to. Once, I saw a post from someone in town, one of those blurry, poorly lit photos on Facebook. Teresa sitting on a bench near the Dollar Tree, eating from a paper bag, hair wild, makeup smeared. The caption read, "She used to be so classy." I stared at the photo for 10 minutes, then closed the tab. Because by then, I understood something I never had before. My mother's downfall wasn't a tragedy. It was a consequence. Every lie, every manipulation, every time she used sickness or sadness as a weapon, it had all come back to her. She lost her grip on me, and without a target, she started pulling everyone else down with her until no one was left. No one. She built a life on control. And when that control vanished, she had nothing underneath it. Nothing but herself. And for once, that wasn't my problem to fix. I never thought peace would feel so quiet. Not empty. Just quiet. A stillness that isn't about tension or holding your breath or waiting for the next emotional explosion. A calm that feels earned, like standing in the eye of a storm that's finally passed. That's what life is like now. But getting here wasn't smooth. It wasn't pretty. There were still fights. Still nights where I woke up with my heart racing, certain I heard her voice in the next room. Still moments where I flinched at phone calls from unknown numbers. Still dreams where I was back in that house, packing and repacking the same suitcase, never able to leave. But I made it. I really did. Therapy was the first step. Amanda helped me find the right person, Dr. Marla Devon. Mid-40s, sharp brown eyes, blunt in the way only someone with no time for bullshit can be. She didn't coddle me, didn't nod and say while I spiraled. In our first session, I gave her the short version of my life story. When I finished, She leaned forward and said, "You know that's abuse, right? Not just dysfunction. Not family stuff. That's trauma." I started crying before I could respond. She gave me tools. Not just labels, but actual methods to rewire the way I process things. We worked through complex PTSD, through the guilt reflexes I'd built like armor, through the internalized shame that told me setting boundaries was cruelty. She showed me how to hold space for my grief without letting it devour me. And slowly, the weight started to lift. I didn't just survive. I started to live. Amanda was patient with me, even when I snapped at her over tiny things. Even when I shut down emotionally for days after getting a letter from Teresa I never opened. She held space for all of it without making it about her. She never demanded healing on a schedule. Never asked me to get over it. She just stayed. We moved in together 6 months after the restraining order was granted. A 2-bedroom townhouse in Summerfield, quiet neighborhood, overgrown lilacs outside the windows. Amanda decorated it with chaotic thrift store art and shelves full of weird ceramic frogs. I brought 2 boxes of books and a clock shaped like a raven. It was ours. She taught me to cook real food, not microwaved rice or sad box dinners. The first time we made soup from scratch, I nearly cried. Something about standing in a kitchen that wasn't poisoned with memories, stirring something warm, felt like rewriting my entire life. Career-wise, things took off faster than I expected. The legal nonprofit I joined in Summerfield offered me a leadership role after a year, program director for client advocacy. It meant long hours, hard decisions, endless admin. But it also meant I was building something that mattered. I started a sub-program specifically for survivors of family-based coercive control. I created pamphlets, gave talks, coordinated with local shelters and legal aid. We hosted a conference. Survivors came from all over the state, women, men, even teenagers, people who, like me, had been raised under the thumb of someone who loved them wrong. At one of those events, I met Lena. She was 19, pale, with sharp shoulders and eyes too old for her age. Her mother had been tracking her with GPS since she was 12. Controlled her bank account. Installed a camera in her bedroom for safety. Lena asked me, "How did you finally leave?" And I told her. Not the polished version. Not the inspirational look at me now speech. I told her the real story. About throwing up from fear. About crying in an empty studio apartment. About changing my phone number and checking the peephole twice every time I got home. But I also told her what came after. The mornings I woke up and didn't feel like screaming. The first time I went to the grocery store without imagining a meltdown in aisle 4. The day I laughed with Amanda until my stomach hurt and didn't feel guilty for it. Lena started crying. So did I. That was the first time I thought maybe my story had value beyond the pain. I wrote it all down. Everything. From the first manipulation to the final escape. I didn't soften it. I didn't disguise names. I posted it anonymously on Reddit, under the subreddit for survivors of toxic families. I titled it, "My mother was the villain of my life, and I still loved her until I didn't." It blew up overnight. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of messages. People saying, "This is my story." People asking how I did it. People who finally found words for what they'd been living through. I couldn't respond to everyone. I didn't try, but I read them all. That post became my closure. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about her anymore. It was about me finally telling the truth out loud to the world. Teresa didn't control the narrative anymore. She didn't control me anymore. One shocking moment came about 8 months after the post went viral. I was at work, prepping documents for a grant application, when I got a call from the front desk. "There's a woman here. She says she knows you. Says her name is Kara." Kara? The name knocked something loose in my brain. Then I remembered. Kara had been my mom's old friend from back when I was maybe 7 or 8. A nurse. Quiet kind. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. I walked to the lobby expecting awkward small talk. Instead, she handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photocopies of letters. Dozens of them. From Teresa. Sent over the last 6 months. "She started writing me again," Kara said. Said she was dying. Said you turned everyone against her. Claimed she had cancer, lupus, a brain tumor. I didn't believe her. But I thought, you should see this. I read every letter. They weren't just manipulative. They were delusional. Whole pages of imagined conversations. Claims that I was in danger, that Amanda was abusing me, that she had visions of me locked in a basement. She had even written a will, leaving me her jewelry and a bag of expired lottery tickets. But the most disturbing part? The last letter wasn't to Kara. It was a copy of one she'd written to my employer. She never sent it, but it was addressed and stamped. She'd accused me of fraud. Detailed accusations. Claims I had stolen nonprofit funds, falsified documents, bullied coworkers. All lies. Kara had stopped her from mailing it. That moment sent a chill down my spine. Even in ruin, even with nothing left, Teresa had still tried to reach across the void and destroy me. Amanda found me that night sitting on the porch, shaking. She held me without asking questions. Then she said, "She doesn't own your story. You do." That became my mantra. Every time a trace of her shadow crept in, through a letter, a memory, a phantom voice in my head, I whispered that phrase to myself. She doesn't own my story. I do. That's the difference now. I still think about her sometimes. Not with longing. Not with rage. Just distance. Like an old scar that doesn't hurt anymore but reminds you of where you've been. The life I have now is real. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. Amanda and I adopted a rescue dog, Beans, who has one eye and barks at his own reflection. I joined a local choir, even though I can't sing to save my life. I take naps without guilt. I say no without panic. I delete texts without reading them. I exist without fear. That's freedom. And if anyone out there is still stuck, still waiting for permission to choose themselves, I want to say this. You don't need permission. You don't need approval. You don't need to keep carrying someone else's brokenness just because they handed it to you when you were too young to say no. You're allowed to drop it. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to be free. I am. For the first time in my life. I am.